Cast your mind back to a British bathroom somewhere between 1974 and 1993. The suite is a colour that defies easy description. The walls are tiled in something that seemed like a good idea at the time. There may be a duck involved. If you grew up in Britain, you have been in this bathroom. You may even have had it in your parents' house. Today we're walking through 10 tile trends that defined the British bathroom for the better part of 3 decades, and that we are collectively very glad to have left behind. There is a shade of green that exists in a very specific corridor of the British subconscious, somewhere between pond water and disappointment. Avocado, not the fruit, the bathroom. Through the 1970s and well into the 80s, Armitage Shanks and Twyfords were turning out complete suites in that unmistakable hue, and the tile manufacturers followed dutifully along. Floor-to-ceiling avocado, bath panel, basin surround, cistern, all coordinated, all relentless, all deeply committed to the bit. At the time, it was aspirational. A coloured suite meant you'd had the bathroom properly redone, not just patched. It meant you were the sort of household that chose things. By the mid-90s, avocado had become the national shorthand for everything wrong with British taste, and ripping one out became a rite of passage for anyone buying a house built before 1985. Estate agents still knock thousands off the asking price for a surviving suite. The tiles, when you finally get them off the wall, take half the plaster with them. Small mercies. Up next, a tile that was doing 3 jobs at once, and none of them particularly well. The textured relief tile had a look that could charitably be described as sculptural. Less charitably, it looked like someone had pressed a doily into wet clay, fired it, and repeated the process 400 times until they had enough to tile a bathroom in Wolverhampton. They came in off-white, cream, and the occasional pale gold, with raised geometric or floral patterns that caught the light in ways the flat wall behind them never quite matched. The theory was that texture added visual interest. The reality was that texture added approximately 40 additional surfaces for limescale, soap scum, and whatever else a British bathroom produces over the course of a decade. Cleaning them required a grout brush, patience, and a willingness to accept that you would never quite get into the deeper recesses. They were sold in DIY sheds throughout the 1970s and 80s as an easy way to give the bathroom a lift. The lift was temporary, the grout was permanent. This one requires a brief pause. Not carpet effect vinyl, not a bath mat of generous proportions. Actual carpet, fitted wall to wall, right up to the base of the loo, in a British bathroom, throughout the 1970s. Usually nylon. Often in a shade that could be described as russet or harvest gold, or simply brown, in a way that was fashionable at the time, and inexplicable now. The logic, such as it was, ran something like this. Lino is cold underfoot in January. Carpet is warm, therefore carpet in the bathroom is an improvement. What this logic failed to account for was steam, splash, the particular habits of small boys with uncertain aim, and the behaviour of nylon carpet in sustained damp conditions. Modern plumbers who pull up bathroom carpet in houses, untouched since the Heath administration, report findings that have apparently affected some of them professionally. The tile trend it represented, the idea that the bathroom floor should be soft and warm, has since been resolved by the underfloor heating mat, which achieves the same warmth without the biology. Stay with me, because the next one turned every British bathroom into a minor exercise in optical illusion. At some point in the 1980s, a significant proportion of British bathroom fitters became convinced that tiles looked better laid at 45 degrees, not on one wall as an accent, on every wall. The floor too, if the budget stretched. The effect was dizzying in the specific way that a room covered in diamonds rather than squares becomes dizzying. There are simply more lines pointing in more directions, competing for attention simultaneously. Cream tiles laid diagonally with a thin dark grout line, was the most common iteration, but the truly committed went with two-tone, alternating white and terracotta diamonds on the floor, white diamonds on the walls, and a bathroom that felt considerably more agitated than a room designed for relaxing and ought to feel. The diagonal lay added roughly 15% more cuts and wastage to any tiling job. Bathroom fitters charged accordingly. The look was nonetheless considered modern and dynamic, which tells you something about the 1980s. This particular combination, ceramic tiles from the floor to roughly chest height, and then wood chip wallpaper from there to the ceiling, painted over in magnolia, was a staple of British bathrooms from the late 1970s right through to the mid-1990s, and it represented a very British approach to the problem of bathroom walls, which is to solve only part of it and leave the rest for another day that never arrived. The tiled dado handled the wet zone adequately enough. The wood chip above it handled the question of what to do with the plaster, which in most British bathrooms of this period was in no condition to be left bare. Together, they produced a bathroom that was neither one thing nor the other, not fully tiled, not properly decorated, but somewhere in the middle, divided by a row of border tiles in a contrasting shade that the previous owner had presumably considered a design choice. Removing the wood chip from above the tiles once the steam has had 15 years to work on it is one of the more dispiriting home improvement tasks available to the British homeowner. Coming up, a colour that made everyone who entered the bathroom look immediately unwell. Peach had a moment, a sustained, confident, nationally distributed moment that lasted from roughly 1982 to 1991 and left its mark on bathrooms from Truro to Aberdeen. The tile version came in a range of shades from pale salmon through to a deeper coral that was only a step or two removed from terracotta, and it was typically paired with peach sanitary ware, peach towels, and a peach bath mat to complete what can only be described as a full commitment. The problem with peach tiles, which nobody seemed to notice at the time, is what peach light does to a human face. The reflective warmth of an entire room finished in coral bounced back at whoever stood at the basin and gave them a complexion that suggested either mild sunstroke or the early stages of something requiring a doctor. You looked, in a peach bathroom, consistently worse than you did anywhere else in the house. The tiles are still out there, in their hundreds of thousands, behind the white paint that a succession of owners have applied in the hope that this counts as doing something about them. The border tile was a reasonable idea in principle, a single row of decorative tiles running horizontally around the bathroom, breaking up a large expanse of plain white and adding a small flourish of personality. In principle. In practice, the border tile of the 1980s and early 90s came in an array of motifs that reflected every current design, obsession simultaneously. Seashells, lighthouses, fish of improbable cheerfulness, Greek key patterns in navy and terracotta, hand-painted fruit in a style borrowed loosely from Provence and in a specific subcategory that deserves its own acknowledgement, the duck. The bathroom duck border tile was a fixture of British bathrooms for the better part of a decade, usually yellow, occasionally accompanied by a matching duck toilet roll holder, a duck soap dish, and a duck print shower curtain that completed the transformation of the bathroom into a statement about nothing in particular. The tiles themselves are virtually indestructible. They will outlast everything else in the house. Hold on, because the next one was considered the height of sophistication by people who had recently been to Spain. The late 1980s package holiday boom had consequences for the British bathroom that are still visible in older properties today. Returning from 2 weeks in Majorca or the Costa del Sol with a head full of whitewashed walls and terracotta floors, a certain type of British homeowner decided that what their bathroom needed was exactly that, reproduced in a semi-detached in Northampton. The result was typically blue and white patterned tiles, usually a vaguely Moorish or Delft-adjacent design on the walls and terracotta quarry tiles on the floor. The aspiration was the Alhambra. The reality was rather more Kettering, not least because the terracotta floor, applied without underfloor heating in a British bathroom in a climate that is not Andalusia, was extraordinarily cold from October through April. The blue and white tiles, to their credit, have aged better than most. Some of them have aged well enough that interior designers are now selling the look deliberately. They're calling it timeless Mediterranean style. The people who tiled their bathrooms in 1989 are choosing not to say anything. Mirror tiles had a short but eventful career in the British bathroom, peaking somewhere around 1977 and declining sharply once enough people had lived with them for a year or two and drawn their own conclusions. The concept was to take one wall of the bathroom, usually the one behind the basin, and cover it entirely in small square mirror tiles, typically 30 centimeters across, creating the impression of a much larger space. The impression was undermined by two practical realities. First, mirror tiles of the era were stuck to the wall with adhesive that allowed each individual tile to sit at a fractionally different angle from its neighbours, meaning the reflection you received was not a single, coherent image, but a slightly cubist version of yourself that no one needed first thing in the morning. Second, the grout lines between the tiles trapped moisture and eventually mould, which the mirror surface then helpfully reflected back at you from every angle simultaneously. They are difficult to remove without breaking and impossible to store once removed. Most were simply tiled over. The last trend on this list is the most quietly persistent and the one most likely to still be lurking in a bathroom near you. The contrast stripe, a single horizontal row of tiles in a different colour or pattern running around the room at roughly chest height, was a feature of British bathrooms from the 1970s right through to the early 2000s, and it survived so long because it was cheap, required minimal planning, and gave the installer the satisfying feeling of having made a design decision. The stripe itself came in every permutation: a row of terracotta in an otherwise white bathroom, a band of burgundy in a cream bathroom, a line of navy in a bathroom that was otherwise attempting to be neutral. None of these combinations were wrong exactly. None of them were quite right either. The stripe divided the wall into two halves that were each slightly too short to feel intentional and slightly too wide to feel like an accent. It is the bathroom equivalent of a semicolon. Present. Technically correct, not entirely sure why it's there.